I stared at the crumpled envelope in my hands, my father's shaky handwriting mocking me from the return address. After 30 years of silence, he chose now to reach out. I tossed it onto the kitchen counter and poured myself a generous glass of Merlot. The phone rang, startling me. It was Greta, my younger sister. "Riley? Did you get one too?" Her voice trembled. I sighed. "Yeah, just now. Haven't opened it yet." "What do you think he wants?" "Money, probably," I scoffed. "Or forgiveness. Fat chance of either." Greta was quiet for a moment. "Maybe we should hear him out. He is our father, after all. Biologically, sure, but he lost the right to call himself that when he walked out on us and Mom." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "I know, but—" "No buts, Greta. He made his choice. We don't owe him anything." After we hung up, I glared at the envelope. Against my better judgment, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting as familiar as it was unwelcome. "Dear Riley, I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I'm dying. Cancer. The doctors give me 6 months at most. I'd like to see you and Greta one last time, to explain and maybe make amends. Please call the number below if you're willing to meet. Love, Dad." I crumpled the letter and hurled it across the room. How dare he? After everything he'd put us through, he thought he could waltz back into our lives with a sob story, and all would be forgiven? The doorbell rang, jolting me from my anger. I opened it to find Grandma Mabel, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. "I saw the car in the driveway," she said. "Thought you might need some company." I stepped aside to let her in, grateful for her presence. Mabel had been our rock after Dad left, and Mom spiraled into depression. She'd raised us, loved us, been the parent we needed. "He wrote to you, didn't he?" Mabel asked, settling onto the couch. I nodded, retrieving the crumpled letter. "How did you know?" "He called me last week, asking for your address." Mabel's lips thinned. "I told him he had no right, but, well, you know your father, stubborn as a mule." I sat beside her, suddenly feeling like a lost little girl again. "What should I do, Grandma?" Mabel took my hand. "That's not for me to decide, sweetheart. But remember, forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the anger that's weighing you down." I leaned my head on her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender. "I don't know if I can face him." "You're stronger than you think, Riley. You always have been." We sat in comfortable silence for a while until Mabel spoke again. "There's something else you should know. Your father left a will." I jerked upright. "What?" Mabel nodded gravely. "He's leaving everything to you and Greta, equal shares." My mind reeled. After abandoning us, after years of no child support or birthday cards, he thought he could buy our love with an inheritance? "I don't want his money," I spat. "I understand, dear. But there's more to it than that. The lawyer mentioned something about family heirlooms, things that belonged to your great-grandmother." My heart clenched. I'd always wondered about our family history. The stories and treasures lost when Dad walked out. The phone rang again, Greta's name flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice tight. "Did you know about the will?" "What will?" Greta gasped. "Riley, what's going on?" As I filled her in, my anger battled with a growing curiosity. What secrets lay hidden in our father's past? And was I ready to face him, to hear his explanations after all these years? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The office bustled with activity, but I couldn't focus. My father's letter and the news of his will weighed heavily on my mind. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice someone approach my desk until a gentle voice broke through my reverie. "Rough morning?" I looked up to see Theo, the new guy from marketing. His kind eyes and easy smile made my heart skip a beat. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, forcing a laugh. He pulled up a chair. "Want to talk about it? I'm told I'm a pretty good listener." Something in his expression made me trust him. Before I knew it, I was spilling the whole story, my father's abandonment, his recent letter, the will. Theo listened intently, his brow furrowing with concern. "That's a lot to process," he said when I finished. "I can relate, actually. My mom left when I was young, never heard from her again." Our eyes met, and I felt a connection I hadn't experienced in years. "How did you deal with it?" I asked. Theo shrugged. "Therapy, mostly, and learning to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine." His words echoed Grandma Mabel's advice, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way through this mess after all. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing. It was Greta. "Riley, you'll never believe it," she exclaimed. "I got the job." My mood instantly lifted. "That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you, sis." As I hung up, I noticed Theo watching me curiously. "Good news?" I nodded, explaining Greta's struggle to find work after her recent divorce. "She's been through so much. It's nice to see things finally looking up for her." Theo's smile was warm. "Sounds like you two are close." "We are now," I admitted. "It wasn't always easy, especially after Dad left, but we've got each other's backs." The rest of the day flew by, my spirits buoyed by Greta's success and Theo's unexpected kindness. As I was packing up to leave, Theo appeared at my desk again. "Listen," he said, looking slightly nervous. "I know this might be terrible timing, but would you like to grab dinner sometime?" My heart raced. It had been so long since I'd felt this kind of connection with someone. But with everything going on with my father, "I'd love to," I heard myself say. "But can we take it slow? I've got a lot on my plate right now." Theo's smile was understanding. "Of course. How about we start with coffee?" As we made plans, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. My stomach dropped as I realized who it must be. "Hello?" I answered hesitantly. "Riley, it's your father." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the edge of my desk, grateful for Theo's steadying presence beside me. "Why are you calling?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know I have no right," my father said, his voice rough with emotion, "but I need to see you and Greta. There are things you need to know, things I should have told you years ago." My mind raced. What could be so important that he'd reach out now, after all this time? "I can't promise anything," I said finally. "I need to talk to Greta first." "I understand," he replied. "Just, please consider it. Time isn't on my side anymore." As I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. Theo placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I shook my head, tears threatening to spill. "I don't know. I thought I was ready to face this, but now." Theo squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, you don't have to go through it alone." Looking into his eyes, I felt a mix of gratitude and fear. Could I trust this newfound connection, or would it crumble like so many others in my life? As we left the office together, I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully constructed world was about to change forever. The question was, would it be for better or worse? I smoothed down my wedding dress, heart racing as I prepared to walk down the aisle. 2 years had passed since that fateful day I met Theo, and now here we were, about to start our life together. As the music swelled, I caught sight of Greta beaming at me from her place as maid of honor. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my eyes locking with Theo's. The ceremony was a blur of joy and tears, but as we said our vows, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally put the pain of my past behind me. 5 years later, that peace was starting to crumble. "Theo?" I called out, padding into our darkened bedroom. "Are you asleep already?" A muffled grunt was my only answer. I sighed, climbing into bed beside my husband's motionless form. This had become our nightly routine, me coming home late from work to find Theo already in bed, claiming exhaustion. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. When was the last time we'd had a real conversation? Made love? The distance between us seemed to grow with each passing day. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and a hastily scrawled note. "Early meeting. See you tonight." I crumpled the paper, frustration building. We needed to talk, really talk, about what was happening to us. My phone buzzed with a text from Greta. "Lunch today? Big news." At least one relationship in my life was solid. Over salads, Greta's eyes sparkled as she shared her excitement. "We're trying for a baby." My heart clenched. "That's wonderful," I managed, forcing a smile. Greta's face fell. "What's wrong, Riles? I thought you'd be happy for me." I reached for her hand. "I am, truly. It's just—" I hesitated, then the words tumbled out. "Theo and I have been trying for years with no luck, and lately, he's been so distant. I don't know what to do." Greta squeezed my hand. "Have you talked to him about it?" I shook my head. "He's always too tired or busy. I'm starting to wonder if he even wants kids anymore." "Oh, Riley," Greta sighed. "You need to confront this head on. Don't let it fester." I nodded, knowing she was right. That evening, I was determined to have it out with Theo, but my plans were derailed by an unexpected visitor. "Irene," I said, surprised to find my mother-in-law on our doorstep. "What brings you by?" Irene swept past me, her perfume cloying in the small entryway. "Where's my son? We need to talk." Before I could answer, Theo appeared, looking wary. "Mom? What's going on?" Irene fixed us both with a stern look. "I'll tell you what's going on. I'm tired of waiting for grandchildren. When are you two going to give me some babies to spoil?" The room seemed to shrink, tension thick in the air. Theo's face paled, and I felt a surge of anger. "That's none of your business," I snapped. "Our family planning is between Theo and me." Irene's eyes narrowed. "It becomes my business when my son is clearly unhappy. I raised him to be a family man, and—" "Enough!" Theo shouted, startling us both. "Mom, you need to leave, now." As the door closed behind a sputtering Irene, I turned to Theo. "We need to talk." He nodded, slumping onto the couch. "I know." I sat beside him, my heart pounding. "What's happening to us, Theo? You're never home, we barely talk, and when was the last time we were intimate?" Theo's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Riley. I've been hiding something from you." My blood ran cold. "What is it?" "Just tell me." He took a shaky breath. "I went to a doctor a few months ago. I'm infertile, Riley. We can't have children. It's my fault." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. All our struggles, all the distance between us, suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Theo's voice broke. I was ashamed. I thought you'd leave me if you knew." As the weight of his confession settled over us, I realized we were at a crossroads. Could our marriage survive this secret? And more importantly, did I want it to? I stared at Theo, his confession hanging heavy in the air between us. Infertile. The word echoed in my mind, a cruel twist of fate that explained so much yet solved nothing. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Theo's shoulders slumped. 6 months. I couldn't bring myself to tell you. I thought if I just worked harder, made more money, maybe it wouldn't matter as much." Anger flared within me. 6 months? You've been lying to me for half a year?" "I'm sorry, Riley. I was scared. I thought you'd leave me if you knew." I stood up, pacing the room. "So instead, you pushed me away? Made me feel like I wasn't enough?" Theo reached for me, but I stepped back. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. As I drove aimlessly through the night, memories flooded back. My father walking out, my mother's descent into depression. The feeling of not being enough, of being abandoned. And now Theo's deception brought it all rushing back. I found myself at Greta's apartment, knocking before I could think better of it. She opened the door, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Riley," she murmured. "What happened?" I spilled everything. Theo's infertility, his lies, my conflicted feelings. Greta listened, her face a mix of sympathy and concern. "What are you going to do?" she asked when I finished. I shook my head. "I don't know. Part of me wants to forgive him, to work through this, but another part is furious and hurt," Greta finished. "That's understandable." We talked late into the night, weighing options and consequences. As dawn broke, I made my decision. Back home, I found Theo asleep on the couch, looking haggard. I gently shook him awake. "Riley," he said, sitting up quickly. "I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" I nodded, sitting beside him. "I'm angry, Theo, and hurt, but I love you, and I want to fight for us." Relief washed over his face. "I love you too. I'll do anything to make this right." "Then no more secrets," I said firmly. "We face this together, starting now." Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into research, doctor's appointments, and long, honest conversations. We explored options: adoption, surrogacy, even remaining child-free. Slowly, the distance between us began to close. One evening, as we cuddled on the couch, Theo turned to me with a serious expression. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we should look into adoption. There are so many kids out there who need a loving home." My heart swelled. "I'd like that," I replied, squeezing his hand. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Greta. "Pregnant, can't wait to tell you all about it tomorrow." I felt a pang of envy, quickly followed by guilt. I should be happy for my sister, shouldn't I? Theo noticed my expression. "What is it?" I showed him the text, watching his face carefully. To my surprise, he smiled. "That's wonderful news. We should celebrate with them." "You're not upset?" I asked hesitantly. He shook his head. "I'm learning that family comes in many forms. We'll find our path, Riley. And in the meantime, we get to be the cool aunt and uncle." His words warmed me, easing some of the tension I'd been carrying. Maybe we could make this work after all. The next day, as we prepared to meet Greta and her husband for dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer. Hello? Riley? A familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in years. It's your father. I know I have no right, but I'm in town. I'd like to see you and Greta if you're willing. I froze, my mind racing. After everything that had happened, could I face him? Should I? Theo appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Riley, what's wrong? I looked at my husband, then back at the phone in my hand. It was time to make a decision, one that could change everything. The day Greta called to announce her engagement was one of the happiest I'd experienced in years. After everything we'd been through, my little sister deserved this joy. As I hung up the phone, an idea struck me. Theo, I called out, I want to give Greta Grandma Mabel's ring for her wedding. What do you think? He appeared in the doorway, smiling. That's a wonderful idea, honey. She'll love it. I felt a warmth spread through me. Despite our struggles, moments like these reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Theo in the first place. The next day, I left work early to search for the ring. I knew it was tucked away in a box in our bedroom closet, a cherished heirloom I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I approached our house, I noticed Theo's car in the driveway. Strange. He usually worked late on Thursdays. I entered quietly, planning to surprise him. But as I neared our bedroom, I heard muffled voices. My heart raced as I pushed the door open. The scene before me shattered my world in an instant. Theo, my husband, tangled in our bedsheets with a woman I'd never seen before. They scrambled to cover themselves, but the damage was done. Riley! Theo gasped, his face a mask of shock and guilt. I can explain. I held up a hand, silencing him. My voice was ice when I spoke. Get out, both of you. Now, the woman, red-faced and avoiding my gaze, gathered her clothes and fled. Theo approached me, reaching out. Please, Riley, let me. Don't touch me, I hissed, recoiling. How long has this been going on? He hesitated, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a one-time mistake, this was a betrayal that ran deep. Get out, I repeated, my voice breaking. I can't even look at you right now. As the front door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto the bed, sobs racking my body. How could he do this? After everything we'd been through, the struggles we'd faced together, how could he throw it all away? Hours passed as I sat there, numb and lost. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it, but seeing Greta's name on the screen, I answered. Riley? Her excited voice felt like it was coming from another world. Have you found the ring yet? I can't wait to see it. The ring. In my shock, I'd completely forgotten why I'd come home early. I haven't had a chance to look yet, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Is everything okay? Greta asked, concern creeping into her tone. You sound off. I wanted to tell her everything, to let my sister comfort me as she had so many times before, but I couldn't bring myself to taint her happiness with my pain. I'm fine, I lied. Just a long day at work. I'll find the ring this weekend, I promise. After hanging up, I forced myself to move. I had to find that ring. It was the one thing I could control right now, the one promise I could keep. As I dug through the closet, my hand brushed against a small box I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a stack of papers, bank statements, hotel receipts, and a letter addressed to Theo from someone named Melissa. With shaking hands, I unfolded the letter. As I read, my world tilted on its axis once again. This wasn't just an affair. Theo had a child, a little girl, with this woman. A child he'd been secretly supporting for years. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The late nights at work, the financial strain we'd been under, his reluctance to pursue adoption. It had all been a lie. I sank to the floor, the evidence of Theo's deception scattered around me. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over. The question was, what would I do now? As dawn broke, I made my decision. I would confront Theo, armed with the truth. But first, I had a call to make. I dialed Greta's number, my resolve strengthening with each ring. When she answered, I took a deep breath. Greta, I need your help. There's something I have to tell you. I paced our living room, my hands shaking as I clutched the damning evidence. Greta's voice echoed in my head, urging me to stay calm, to think clearly. But how could I, when my entire world had just imploded? The sound of a key in the lock made me freeze. Theo entered, his face a mask of guilt and fear. Riley, he began, I know what you saw, but please. Sit down, I cut him off, my voice ice cold. We need to talk. He sank onto the couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I know everything, Theo, I said, spreading the papers on the coffee table between us. The affair, the secret bank account, and your daughter. His face paled. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know, I snapped. What matters is that you've barely above a whisper. 4, Theo replied. Her name is Emma. 4 years. Our entire marriage had been built on this lie. I want a divorce, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Theo's head snapped up. Riley, please, we can work through this. I'll do anything. There's nothing to work through, I interrupted. You've been living a double life, Theo. How can I ever trust you again? He stood, reaching for me. I love you, Riley. Only you. Melissa was a mistake. I stepped back, anger flaring. A mistake? You have a child with her. That's not a mistake. That's a life-altering decision you made without me. Tears streamed down my face as I continued. And what about Emma? She's innocent in all this. How could you keep her a secret, deny her a father? Theo's shoulders slumped. I was scared. I thought I'd lose everything. You, my job, my family. I convinced myself that supporting them financially was enough. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You're going to lose it all anyway. I grabbed a folder from the side table and thrust it at him. These are divorce papers. I'm asking for alimony, given the years of deception and financial infidelity. Theo's hands trembled as he took the folder. Riley, please, can't we at least try counseling? I shook my head. It's too late for that. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You have until the end of the week to move out. As the reality of the situation sank in, Theo's face crumpled. What am I supposed to do? Where will I go? For a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered the look on his face when I caught him with that woman, the years of lies and secrets. That's not my problem anymore, I said, my voice hard. You made your choices, Theo. Now you have to live with them. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of him any longer. I'll be staying with Greta for a few days. When I come back, I expect you to be gone. As I headed for the door, Theo called out one last time. Riley, wait, there's something else you need to know. But I was already gone, slamming the door behind me. Whatever other secrets he was hiding, I couldn't bear to hear them. Not now, maybe not ever. As I drove to Greta's, my mind raced. How had my life come to this? And more importantly, where did I go from here? I'd been staying at Greta's for a week when Theo's incessant calls finally wore me down. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a cafe near my house. As I approached, I saw him hunched over a table, looking haggard and unkempt. A pang of sympathy shot through me, quickly replaced by anger. He didn't get to look devastated. He wasn't the victim here. Riley, he said, standing as I sat down. Thank you for coming. I cut straight to the chase. What do you want, Theo? I thought I made myself clear. He took a deep breath. There's more you need to know, about Emma, about everything. My heart raced. What more could there possibly be? I'm listening, I said, my voice cold. Theo's eyes filled with tears. Emma, she's sick, leukemia. That's why I've been taking so much money out of our accounts, for her treatments. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A sick child. Of course, because this situation wasn't complicated enough already. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, my anger momentarily forgotten. I was a coward, Theo admitted. I thought I could handle it all on my own, but I can't. I need your help, Riley. I laughed bitterly. My help? You lied to me for years, Theo. You cheated on me, and now you want my help? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I know I don't deserve it, he said, but Emma does. She's innocent in all this. A memory flashed through my mind, my father walking out, leaving us to fend for ourselves, the pain of abandonment that had shaped my entire life. What exactly are you asking me to do? I asked, my voice shaking. Theo hesitated. The treatments aren't working. She needs a bone marrow transplant. Neither Melissa nor I are a match. The implication hung heavy in the air. He wanted me to get tested, to potentially save the life of the child born from his betrayal. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Greta. Dad's in the hospital. It's bad. Come quick. I stood abruptly, my head spinning. I have to go, I told Theo. My father, he's dying. Theo's face fell. Riley, I'm so sorry, but please think about what I said. Emma doesn't have much time. As I rushed to my car, emotions warred within me. My dying father, who had abandoned us years ago. Theo's sick daughter, a child I'd never met but who shared my husband's blood. The ghosts of my past colliding with the wreckage of my present. At the hospital, I found Greta in the waiting room, her face tear-stained. "He's asking for you," she said softly. I entered my father's room, steeling myself. He looked small and frail, a shadow of the man who had loomed so large in my childhood memories. "Riley," he rasped. "You came." I nodded, unable to speak. "I know I have no right," he continued, "but I need to tell you something about why I left." Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him it was too late for explanations. But another part, the little girl who had always wondered why she wasn't enough, needed to hear it. "Go on," I said, my father's eyes filled with tears. "I had another family, a wife, 2 sons. They didn't know about you and Greta. When your mother found out, she gave me an ultimatum. I made the wrong choice." The room seemed to close in around me. Another family. More siblings I'd never known about. How many more secrets could one day hold? "Why are you telling me this now?" I demanded. "Because they're here," he said. "Your brothers. They want to meet you." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. 2 men entered, their faces a strange mix of familiar and foreign. I looked from them to my dying father, to Greta hovering in the doorway, her face a mirror of my own shock. In that moment, I felt the weight of every lie, every secret, every betrayal crushing down on me. "I can't do this," I choked out, pushing past my newfound brothers and into the hallway. As I ran, Theo's words echoed in my mind, mingling with my father's confession and the sight of those strangers who shared my blood. How many more impossible choices would I have to make? How much more could I possibly take? The day of the divorce hearing arrived with a sense of finality I wasn't prepared for. As I walked into the courthouse, I spotted Theo standing with Irene and a woman I assumed was Melissa. The sight of them together, a twisted family unit, made my stomach churn. "Riley," Theo called out, approaching me. "Please, can we talk before?" "There's nothing left to say," I cut him off, brushing past them. Inside, our lawyers presented their cases. I sat, numb, as the details of our shattered marriage were laid bare. Theo's infidelity, the financial deception, the secret child. It all felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. As the judge prepared to make her ruling, Theo suddenly stood. "Your Honor, I need to say something." My heart raced as he turned to face me. "Riley, I know I've hurt you beyond measure. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Emma, she's getting worse. The doctors say she might not have much time left." The courtroom fell silent. I could feel all eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. "What are you asking, Theo?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to consider getting tested as a bone marrow donor. I know it's an impossible request, but she's just a little girl. She doesn't deserve to suffer for my mistakes." The weight of his words crashed over me. I thought of my father, lying in a hospital bed, seeking redemption too late. Of the brothers I'd never known, waiting for a chance to connect. Of Greta, always by my side, proof that family could transcend blood. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. "I'll do it," I said, my voice stronger now. "I'll get tested, but not for you, Theo, for Emma." The relief on his face was palpable, but I wasn't finished. "And if I'm a match, if I go through with this, I want something in return." "Anything," Theo said quickly. I took a deep breath. "I want you to sign away your parental rights, to let me adopt Emma." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Theo's face paled. "But she's my daughter." "And you failed her," I said firmly, "just like my father failed me. I won't let another child grow up feeling abandoned and unloved. Emma deserves better." Tears streamed down Theo's face as he nodded slowly. "Okay," he whispered. "If that's what it takes to save her, I'll do it." The judge, visibly moved, called a recess to allow us to work out the details. As we left the courtroom, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Irene. "Riley," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology. I've been so blind to Theo's faults, so focused on having a grandchild, I never saw the amazing woman you are." I nodded, accepting her words but not quite ready to forgive. As I turned away, I saw Greta rushing towards me, her face a mix of concern and pride. "I heard everything," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded against her shoulder. "I am. It's time to break the cycle, Greta, to be the family we always wished we had." Over the next few weeks, as we waited for the test results, I spent time with my father and newfound brothers. It wasn't easy, but slowly we began to build bridges. When the call came that I was a match for Emma, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never known before. The day of the transplant, I lay in the hospital bed, watching as my bone marrow was collected. Across the hall, a little girl I'd never met waited for the gift of life. As the nurse wheeled me out, I caught sight of Theo in the waiting room, looking lost and broken. "Take care of her," I said as I passed him. "Until I can." He nodded, unable to speak. As I recovered, surrounded by Greta, my brothers, and even my ailing father, I realized that family wasn't about perfect people or unbroken bonds. It was about choice, about love that perseveres despite the pain. Months later, as I finalized Emma's adoption papers, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to be the parent I'd always needed, to create a family built on honesty and unconditional love. As I signed my name, making Emma officially mine, I thought of Grandma Mabel's words from so long ago. "Family is more than blood, Riley. It's about who stands by you when the world falls apart." Looking at the little girl who now called me Mom, I knew those words had never been truer. We were survivors, Emma and I, and together we'd write a new chapter, one of healing, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. "You're nothing without me, Evelyn. Remember that." Dominic's words cut deep as I cradle our newborn daughter, Aria. I look down at her innocent face, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I feel a wave of despair wash over me. How did I get here? How did I let myself become so trapped, so helpless? I've always been a strong, independent woman, but Dominic has a way of making me feel small and insignificant. Since Aria's birth, his controlling behavior has escalated to new heights. He dictates my every move, from what I wear to who I can see. He even controls our finances, leaving me completely dependent on during my maternity leave. "I'm going out," Dominic announces, grabbing his keys from the counter. "I expect dinner to be ready when I get back." I nod silently, not daring to argue. I've learned the hard way that defiance only leads to more pain. As the door slams behind him, I let out a shaky breath and hug Aria closer to my chest. I think back to the early days of our relationship when Dominic seemed like the perfect man. Charming, successful, and attentive, he swept me off my feet. Our whirlwind romance led to a quick marriage, and before I knew it, I was pregnant with Aria. But now, as I sit alone in our lavish apartment, surrounded by all the trappings of wealth, I feel more trapped than ever. Dominic's true colors have emerged, and I'm left wondering how I ever fell for his facade. A sudden cry from Aria jolts me back to the present. I rock her gently, whispering soothing words as I try to calm her. But even as I comfort my daughter, I can feel the weight of Dominic's control bearing down on me. I glance at the clock, realizing I only have a few hours before he returns. I need to start dinner, but the thought of facing another evening of his criticism and verbal abuse makes my stomach churn. As I lay Aria down in her crib, I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me is a shell of her former self. Dark circles under her eyes, a forced smile masking the pain. I hardly recognize her, but as I watch Aria drift off to sleep, a flicker of determination sparks within me. I can't let my daughter grow up thinking this is normal, that this is what love looks like. I need to find a way out, not just for myself, but for her. I take a deep breath and straighten my shoulders. I may feel trapped and helpless now, but I refuse to let Dominic break me. I will find a way to escape his grasp, to build a better life for Aria and myself. As I head to the kitchen to start dinner, I silently vow to myself that this will be the last meal I cook under Dominic's roof. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I will find the strength to break free from this nightmare. For Aria's sake, and for my own, I have to. As I sit in the darkness of Aria's nursery, my mind drifts back to the beginning of my relationship with Dominic. It all seemed so perfect, like a fairy tale come to life. I was 28, a successful young woman with a promising career when I met him at a charity event. He was 35, charming, and incredibly handsome. I was instantly smitten. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners, lavish gifts, and grand gestures. Dominic made me feel like I was the center of his universe. He promised me the world, and I believed every word. "Evelyn, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he whispered in my ear as we danced at a gala. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." I melted into his arms, convinced that I had found my soulmate. When he proposed just 3 months later, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding was a grand affair, with no expense spared. I felt like a princess as I walked down the aisle in my designer gown, Dominic waiting for me at the altar with a smile that could light up the room. "I love you, Evelyn," he said as he slipped the ring on my finger. "I promise to cherish you forever." I believed him with all my heart. We settled into married life, and for a while everything was perfect. Dominic continued to shower me with attention and gifts, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But then, just a few months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. I was overjoyed, but Dominic's reaction was not what I expected. "A baby now?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I thought we agreed to wait a few years. I was taken aback by his response. We had discussed starting a family, but I didn't realize he had such a specific timeline in mind. "I know it's a bit sooner than we planned, but isn't it wonderful news?" I asked, trying to gauge his reaction. Dominic's face softened, and he pulled me into an embrace. "Of course it is, darling. I'm just surprised, that's all. We'll make it work." But as my pregnancy progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in Dominic's behavior. He became more controlling, more possessive. He started questioning my every move, demanding to know where I was and who I was with at all times. I chalked it up to nerves about impending fatherhood and tried to reassure him that everything would be fine. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me that something wasn't right. When Aria was born, Dominic's behavior only intensified. He criticized everything I did, from the way I changed her diaper to the way I held her. He insisted on being present for every feeding, every bath time, every moment of her life. At first, I thought he was just being an attentive father. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized that his attention was more about control than love. "You're doing it wrong," he would snap as I tried to soothe Aria's cries. "Give her to me. I'll show you how it's done." I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate his every mood and whim. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but I didn't dare complain. I was afraid of what he might do if I pushed back. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed. The way he isolated me from my friends and family, the way he made me feel like I was nothing without him. I was so blinded by love that I couldn't see the truth. But now, as I sit in the darkness, watching my daughter sleep, I know I can't let this continue. I have to find a way out, not just for myself, but for Aria. She deserves a better life than this. I just hope I have the strength to do what needs to be done. Aria's cries pierce the night, and I stumble out of bed, exhausted. It's been weeks since I've had a full night's sleep, and the toll is starting to show. As I enter the nursery, I find Dominic already there, holding our daughter. "I've got this," he says, his voice cold. "Go back to bed." I hesitate, wanting to comfort my own child, but the look in Dominic's eyes tells me not to argue. I retreat to our bedroom, feeling helpless and alone. The next morning, I'm in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Dominic storms in, his face contorted with anger. "Why isn't the laundry done?" he demands, holding up a shirt. "I have a big meeting today, and I need this pressed." I glance at the clock, realizing I've lost track of time while caring for Aria. "I'm sorry, I'll do it right now," I say, reaching for the shirt, but Dominic yanks it away, his eyes narrowing. "You're always making excuses." He sneers. "I work hard to provide for this family, and you can't even handle simple household chores." I feel my cheeks burn with shame and frustration. "I'm doing the best I can," I protest weakly. Dominic scoffs. "Your best isn't good enough. I deserve better than this." He storms out of the kitchen, leaving me fighting back tears. I know I should stand up for myself, but I'm too tired, too beaten down. Later that day, I'm trying to soothe a fussy Aria when the phone rings. It's the bank, informing me that my credit card has been declined. Confused, I hang up and log into our online banking account. What I see makes my blood run cold. Our savings account, the one I thought we were using for Aria's college fund, is nearly empty. Thousands of dollars, gone without a trace. I confront Dominic that evening, holding up the bank statement with shaking hands. "What is this?" I demand. "Where did all our money go?" Dominic barely glances at the paper before shrugging. "I had some expenses come up. Business stuff you wouldn't understand." Business stuff? I echo, incredulous. Dominic, that was our daughter's college fund. How could you just spend it without telling me? He fixes me with a cold stare. I don't have to tell you anything. I'm the one who earns the money in this family. I'll spend it how I see fit. I reel back as if slapped. But we're supposed to be partners, I whisper. We should make these decisions together. Dominic laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. Partners? You're nothing without me, Evelyn. I gave you everything. This house, those clothes, that baby. You owe me. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Is this what our marriage has become? A transaction? A debt to be paid? I turn away, fighting back tears. I'm going to put Arya to bed, I say, my voice trembling. As I rock my daughter to sleep, I feel a sense of despair wash over me. How did I let things get this bad? How did I become so dependent on a man who treats me like a possession? I think of my own mother, who raised me on her own after my father left. She was so strong, so independent. What would she think of me now, trapped in a marriage with a man who doesn't respect me? I kiss Arya's forehead, feeling a fierce surge of love and protectiveness. I can't let her grow up thinking this is normal. I can't let Dominic's poison infect her too. I may be trapped for now, but I won't let him break me. I'll find a way out, no matter what it takes. For Arya's sake and for my own. I'm at my wit's end when I finally meet best friend Scarlett. We've been friends since college, and she's always been there for me, no matter what. I don't know what to do, I confess, my voice breaking. Dominic is controlling every aspect of my life. I feel like I'm suffocating. Scarlett listens patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. Evelyn, this isn't right, she says gently. He shouldn't be treating you like this. I nod, wiping away tears. I know, but I'm scared, Scarlett. He's threatened to take Arya away from me if I try to leave. Scarlett's eyes widen. He can't do that, she insists. You're Arya's mother. You have rights. She helps me gather evidence of Dominic's deceit and verbal abuse. We take screenshots of the bank statements, documenting the missing funds. I start keeping a journal, writing down every hurtful thing he says to me. Armed with this information, I confront Dominic. We need to talk, I say, my voice shaking but determined. He barely looks up from his phone. Can't it wait? I'm busy. No, it can't wait, I insist. Dominic, I know about the money. I know you've been hiding things from me. At this, he finally meets my gaze, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I hold up the bank statements. You've been spending our savings without telling me. Our daughter's college fund. Gone. Dominic scoffs. Is that what this is about? It's just money, Evelyn. I'll make more. It's not just about the money, I say, my voice rising. It's about the lying, the secrets. It's about the way you treat me. He stands up, towering over me. The way I treat you? I give you everything, Evelyn. A beautiful home, a comfortable life. And this is how you repay me? By snooping through my things and making accusations? I take a step back, my heart pounding. I'm not making accusations. I'm telling the truth, and I'm done letting you control me. Dominic's face contorts with rage. You ungrateful bitch, he snarls. If you think you can leave me, think again. I'll make sure you never see Arya again. His words hit me like a slap in the face. You can't do that, I whisper, echoing Scarlett's words. Watch me, he says, his voice cold. I have money, connections. I'll bury you in court. You'll be lucky to get visitation, let alone custody. I feel like I can't breathe. The thought of losing Arya is too much to bear. But then I think of the evidence Scarlett and I have gathered. The bank statements, the journal entries, the recordings of Dominic's threats. I straighten my spine, looking him dead in the eye. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dominic. I have proof of everything you've done, the lies, the abuse. If you try to take Arya away from me, I'll fight you with everything I have. For a moment, Dominic looks stunned. Then his face twists into an ugly sneer. You think you're so clever, don't you? But you're forgetting one thing. I own you, Evelyn. I own everything. And I'll destroy you before I let you leave me. With that, he storms out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sink to the floor, my legs shaking. I know this is just the beginning. Dominic won't let me go without a fight, but for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope. I'm not alone anymore. I have Scarlett, and I have the truth on my side. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughter and myself, even if it means going to war with the man I once loved. With Scarlett's help, I begin secretly planning my escape from Dominic's clutches. We meet in quiet coffee shops and secluded parks, always looking over our shoulders for any sign of my husband. You need to start saving money, Scarlett advises. Open a separate bank account, one that Dominic doesn't know about. I nod, jotting down notes in a small, nondescript notebook. I'll start skimming a little bit from the grocery budget each week. He won't notice if I'm careful. Scarlett also helps me document Dominic's abuse. We take photos of the bruises on my arms, the holes he's punched in the walls during his rages. I save every threatening text message, every cruel email. It's during one of these evidence-gathering sessions that I stumble upon a shocking discovery. I'm going through Dominic's email, looking for anything incriminating, when I find a string of messages between him and his secretary, Tessa. At first, I think they're just work-related, but as I read on, my stomach twists with a sickening realization. They're not just colleagues, they're having an affair. I miss you, Tessa writes in one email. Last night was amazing. When can we do it again? Dominic's response is filled with explicit details of their trysts, of the things he wants to do to her. I feel like I'm going to be sick. But even as the betrayal cuts me to the core, I feel a flicker of something else. Hope. If Dominic is cheating on me, that means I have even more leverage against him. I print out the emails with shaking hands, adding them to my growing pile of evidence. Armed with this new information, I finally work up the courage to file for divorce. Scarlett comes with me to the courthouse, holding my hand as I fill out the paperwork. When we return home, Dominic is waiting for us. "Where have you been?" he demands, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "I was filing for divorce," I say, my voice steady. "I'm leaving you, Dominic." For a moment he looks stunned. Then his face contorts with rage. "You can't leave me," he snarls. "I won't let you." He takes a step towards me, his fists clenched, but before he can lay a hand on me, Scarlett steps between us. "Don't you dare touch her," she says, her voice like steel. "We have evidence of everything you've done, the abuse, the cheating. If you come near Evelyn or Arya again, we'll go straight to the police." Dominic's eyes widen as he takes in the folder in Scarlett's hand. "You're bluffing," he says, but I can hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Try me," Scarlett replies, her gaze unwavering. For a long moment, they stare each other down. Then Dominic takes a step back, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "Fine," he spits. "You want a divorce? You've got it, but don't think for a second that this is over. I'll make your life a living hell, Evelyn. You'll be begging me to take you back." With that, he storms out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I collapse onto the couch, my legs shaking. Scarlett sits beside me, pulling me into a tight hug. "You did it," she whispers. "You're free." But even as relief washes over me, I know that this is just the beginning. Dominic won't let me go without a fight. He'll do everything in his power to make me suffer. But for the first time in years, I feel a glimmer of hope. I've taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, my freedom, and I won't let Dominic break me. Not again. Not ever. The divorce proceedings begin, and I steel myself for the battle ahead. Dominic has hired a high-powered attorney, a shark in an expensive suit, but I have Scarlett by my side and a fierce determination to protect my daughter. Our first meeting is tense, with Dominic glaring at me from across the conference room table. His lawyer, a man with slicked-back hair and a predatory smile, leans forward. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he begins, his voice dripping with condescension. "My client is willing to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for your cooperation in keeping this matter private." I feel a flush of anger rising in my cheeks. "Generous?" I repeat, my voice tight. "You mean hush money, to keep me quiet about the abuse, the cheating." Dominic's lawyer smirks. "Let's not throw around accusations, Mrs. Hawthorne. My client denies any wrongdoing." I lean forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "I have proof," I say, my voice steady. "Emails, text messages, photographs. I'm not afraid to use them." For a moment, the lawyer's smug expression falters. Then he recovers, clearing his throat. "Be that as it may, I think we can all agree that a protracted legal battle is in no one's best interests, especially not your daughter's." At the mention of Arya, I feel a stab of fear. Dominic knows she's my weakness, my Achilles heel. "What do you want?" I ask, my voice tight. Dominic leans forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "Joint custody," he says. "And a gag order. You keep your mouth shut about our marriage, and I'll let you see Arya on weekends." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. The thought of being separated from my daughter, of only seeing her a few days a month, is unbearable. But then I think of the alternative, of Arya growing up in a home filled with anger and violence, of learning that love means pain and fear. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. No, I say, my voice ringing with conviction. I won't agree to that. I want full custody, and I want you out of our lives for good. Dominic's face twists with rage. You can't do that, he snarls. I'm her father. I have rights. You lost those rights the first time you raised a hand to me, I say, my voice shaking with anger. The first time you chose your own selfish desires over your family. I slide a folder across the table, watching as Dominic's lawyer flips through the pages with a growing look of unease. This is just the beginning, I say, my voice steady. If you try to fight me on this, I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of man you really are. For a long moment, Dominic stares at me, his eyes burning with hatred. Then he turns to his lawyer, muttering something under his breath. The lawyer clears his throat, his expression strained. Perhaps we should take a break, he suggests. Reconvene at a later date, when emotions aren't running quite so high. I nod, feeling a rush of triumph. I know this is just the first battle in what will likely be a long and brutal war. But for now, I've won. As I leave the conference room, Scarlett falls into step beside me, her hand on my shoulder. You were amazing in there, she says, her voice filled with pride. I've never seen you so strong, so fearless. I manage a small smile even as my heart races with adrenaline. I had to be, I say, for Arya, for myself. We step out into the bright sunlight, and I take a deep breath of fresh air. It feels like the first time I've been able to breathe freely in years. I know the road ahead will be hard. Dominic won't give up without a fight, and I'll have to be strong, and stronger than I've ever been. But for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I can build a better life for my daughter and myself. A life free from fear, from pain, a life filled with love and laughter and joy. And I'll fight like hell to make that life a reality. The divorce is finalized, and I'm granted full custody of Arya. Dominic is ordered to pay child support and alimony, a fact that leaves him seething with rage. But even as I celebrate my victory, I know that he won't let this go easily. Dominic is a man who hates to lose, who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. I'm proven right just a few days later, when I'm awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of shattering glass. I bolt out of bed, my heart pounding, and race to Arya's room. She's sleeping peacefully, her little face relaxed in slumber. But as I turn to leave, I catch a glimpse of movement outside her window. It's Dominic, his face twisted with fury. He's holding a baseball bat, the shattered remains of the window at his feet. You think you've won? He snarls, his voice slurring with drink. You think you can just take my daughter away from me? I feel a rush of fear, followed quickly by anger. Get out of here, Dominic, I say, my voice shaking. You're violating the restraining order. I'll call the police. He laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. Go ahead, he taunts. Call them. By the time they get here, I'll be long gone, and you'll be left picking up the pieces, just like always. I take a step forward, my fists clenched at my sides. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dominic. I'm done letting you control me, letting you hurt me. His eyes narrow, and he takes a step closer, the bat raised threateningly. You should be afraid, he growls. I'll make your life a living hell, Evelyn. I'll take Arya away from you, one way or another. But even as he speaks, I feel a sense of calm washing over me. I've spent so long living in fear of this man, letting him dictate my every move, but not anymore. I reach into my pocket, my fingers closing around my phone. I have proof, Dominic, I say, my voice steady. Proof of your abuse, your cheating, your illegal business dealings. If you come near me or Arya again, I'll expose everything. For a moment, he looks stunned. Then his face contorts with rage, and he takes another step forward, the bat raised high. But before he can swing, the sound of sirens fills the air. Red and blue lights flash through the broken window, casting an eerie glow over the room. Dominic freezes, his eyes wide with panic. He looks from me to the window, his grip on the bat slackening. This isn't over, he snarls, backing away. I'll find a way to make you pay, Evelyn. I swear it. With that, he turns and runs, disappearing into the night just as the police cars screech to a halt outside. I sink to the floor, my legs shaking with relief. Arya stirs in her crib, her little face scrunching up in confusion. "It's okay, baby," I whisper, gathering her into my arms. "Mommy's here. You're safe now." The police take my statement, and I show them the evidence I've gathered against Dominic. They assure me that they'll do everything in their power to keep us safe, to make sure he never comes near us again. But even as I nod and thank them, I know that this is just the beginning. Dominic is a man who doesn't know how to lose, who will stop at nothing to get his revenge. I'll have to be vigilant, always looking over my shoulder, always ready for the next attack. But I'm not alone anymore. I have Scarlett and the support of the law on my side. And most importantly, I have Arya, my beautiful, innocent daughter, who deserves a life free from fear and pain. I'll do whatever it takes to give her that life, to build a future for us that's filled with love and laughter and joy, even if it means facing down the devil himself. 5 years have passed since that fateful night when Dominic shattered our window and threatened to take Arya away from me. In that time, I've worked hard to rebuild my life, to create a safe and happy home for my daughter. I've thrown myself into my career, working my way up the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm. My colleagues admire my tenacity, my ability to think outside the box, and come up with creative solutions to even the toughest challenges. But my greatest achievement is Arya. She's grown into a bright, curious 5-year-old with her father's dark hair and my green eyes. She's the light of my life, the reason I get up every morning and face the world with a smile. We have a little routine, Arya and I. Every morning I make her breakfast and pack her lunch, then walk her to the bus stop for kindergarten. In the evenings we curl up on the couch and read stories together, or have dance parties in the living room. It's a simple life, but it's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. One day, as I'm walking Arya to the bus stop, I bump into a familiar face. It's Liam, a single father who lives down the street. I've seen him around the neighborhood, always with his little boy, Max, in tow. "Evelyn, right?" he says, smiling warmly. "I don't think we've officially met. I'm Liam." I shake his hand, feeling a flutter of something in my chest. "Nice to meet you, Liam. This is my daughter, Arya." Arya waves shyly, hiding behind my leg. Liam crouches down to her level, his eyes twinkling. "Hi there, Arya. I like your backpack. Is that a unicorn?" Arya nods, a tiny smile spreading across her face. "Yeah, unicorns are my favorite." Liam grins, standing back up. "Well, maybe we can all get together for a playdate sometime. Max loves unicorns, too." I find myself nodding, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. "That would be great. Here, let me give you my number." As we exchange numbers, I can't help but feel a spark of something. A connection, a sense of possibility. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I start spending more time together. We take the kids to the park, have picnics in the backyard. He's kind and funny and thoughtful, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. And he's an amazing father. I watch him with Max, the way he listens patiently to his son's endless chatter, the way he gets down on the floor to play with him. It's clear that he loves his boy with every fiber of his being. Slowly but surely, I feel myself falling for him, and for the first time in a long time, I allow myself to imagine a future that's not just about survival, but about happiness. But even as I bask in the glow of new love, I can't shake the feeling that Dominic is still out there, waiting for his chance to strike. And I'm right. One evening, as Liam and I are enjoying a quiet dinner while the kids play in the living room, there's a knock at the door. I open it to find Dominic standing there, his face haggard and his eyes wild. "Evelyn," he says, his voice raspy, "I need to talk to you." I feel a rush of fear, followed quickly by anger. "What are you doing here, Dominic? You know you're not supposed to come near me or Arya." He holds up his hands, his expression pleading. I know, but I had to see you. I've lost everything, Evelyn, my job, my money, even Tessa left me. I have nothing left." For a moment, I feel a flicker of pity, but then I remember all the pain he's caused, all the fear and heartache. "I'm sorry, Dominic," I say, my voice firm, "but that's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." His face twists with rage, and he takes a step forward. "You did this to me, you bitch. You ruined my life." But before he can say another word, Liam is there, stepping between us. "I think you should leave," he says, his voice calm but firm, "before I call the police." Dominic looks from Liam to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. But finally he turns and walks away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As I watch him go, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. I know that he'll always be a part of my past, a shadow that I can never fully escape. But I also know that I'm stronger than he is. I've survived his abuse, his manipulation. I've built a life for myself and my daughter, a life filled with love and joy and possibility. And as I turn back to Liam, to the man who has shown me what true love and partnership can be, I know that I'm finally free. Free to live, to love, to be happy. And that's the greatest revenge of all. The phone trembled in my hand as I dialed Alan's number for the third time. My heart raced, each ring echoing the pounding in my chest. Finally he answered. "What is it, Camille?" His voice was sharp, irritated. I took a shaky breath. "Alan, I can't do this anymore. I feel so alone, even when you're here. It's like I'm living with a stranger." "Christ, not this again," he groaned. "You're being dramatic. I work hard to provide for us, and this is the thanks I get?" Tears stung my eyes. "That's not fair. I'm not asking for much, just for you to be present, to care." "I do care," Alan snapped. "But I can't be at your beck and call every minute. You knew what you were signing up for when you married me." His words hit like a slap. Did I? Because the man I married actually wanted to spend time with me. He didn't treat me like an inconvenience. "Oh, for God's sake," Alan muttered. "Look, I'm in the middle of something important. We'll talk about this later." "We never talk about it later," I said, my voice breaking. "That's the whole problem." "Camille, you're being ridiculous. Pull yourself together and stop acting like a child. I'll be home when I'm home." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling hollow and numb. How had we gotten here? This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I said I do 5 years ago. A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Camille? Are you all right, dear?" It was Diane, Alan's mother. I quickly wiped my eyes. "I'm fine, Diane. Just a little tired." The door creaked open, and Diane's concerned face appeared. I couldn't help overhearing, "Did you have another fight with Alan?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Diane sighed and sat beside me on the bed. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. My son can be difficult sometimes." "That's putting it mildly," I said with a bitter laugh. Diane patted my hand. "I know it's not easy living here with me. It's not what you imagined for your marriage." "No, Diane, it's not your fault," I assured her. "You've been nothing but kind. It's Alan," she finished. "I love my son, but I'm not blind to his faults. He takes after his father in some unfortunate ways." I looked at her, surprised by her frankness. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing myself in this marriage." Diane's eyes hardened with resolve. "Then it's time we did something about it. You deserve better, Camille, and it's high time my son remembered the man he's supposed to be." "What do you mean?" I asked, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "I mean," Diane said, squeezing my hand, "that it's time we gave Alan a wake-up call, together." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than despair. "What did you have in mind?" Diane's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Well, my dear, let's just say that sometimes a mother knows best how to handle her wayward son. Are you ready to fight for your marriage?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling a surge of determination. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm ready." As Diane began to outline her plan, my phone buzzed with a text from Alan. "Working late, don't wait up." I showed it to Diane, who shook her head in disappointment. "Oh, Alan," she murmured, "you have no idea what's coming." Little did I know, as Diane and I plotted our next move, that this was just the beginning of a storm that would change all our lives forever. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed a stranger, tired eyes, worry lines etched around her mouth. How had I become this person? My mind drifted back to the day I first met Alan. God, he'd been charming then. We were both working on a big marketing campaign, our desks side by side. His quick wit and easy smile had drawn me in like a moth to flame. Earth to Camille, Alan's voice snapped me back to the present. He leaned against the doorframe, impatience written across his face. "Are you planning on spending all day in here? We're going to be late for dinner with Mom." I sighed, applying a last swipe of lipstick. "I'm ready. Let's go." The drive to Diane's was tense, silence hanging heavy between us. As we pulled into the driveway, Alan turned to me. Try to act normal tonight, okay? Mom doesn't need to hear about our problems. My jaw clenched. Our problems? You mean the fact that you barely acknowledge my existence? Alan's eyes flashed with anger. Not this again. Just behave, all right? Before I could retort, Diane opened the front door, beaming at us. There you are. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. As we stepped inside, the familiar scent of Diane's pot roast filled the air. It was comforting, a reminder of happier times when Alan and I first got married. We'd been so excited to start our life together, to find our own place and build our future. But then Alan had lost his job, and Diane had offered to let us stay with her just until things got back on track. That was 3 years ago. So how are things? Diane asked as we sat down to eat. Her eyes darted between Alan and me, sensing the tension. Fine, Alan said curtly, shoveling food into his mouth. I plastered on a smile. Everything's great, Diane. Thanks for having us over. Diane nodded, unconvinced. You know, I was thinking, it must be hard for you two, still living here after all this time. Have you thought about looking for your own place? Alan's fork clattered against his plate. Mom, we've talked about this. It doesn't make financial sense right now. But surely with both your salaries, Diane began. Drop it, Mom, Alan snapped. We're fine where we are. I stared at my plate, fighting back tears. This wasn't fine. None of this was fine. Actually, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I've been thinking about that too, Diane. Maybe it is time we found our own place. Alan's head whipped towards me, his eyes blazing. What are you talking about? We can't afford it. We could if we budgeted, I countered, gaining courage. I've been looking at some apartments. Behind my back? Alan's voice rose. Jesus, Camille, do you ever stop nagging? Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Alan, don't speak to your wife that way. But Alan was on a roll now. You want to know why we can't move out, Camille? Because you're terrible with money. Always buying useless crap we don't need. At least here, Mom keeps you in check. The room fell silent. I felt as if I'd been slapped. That's enough, Diane said firmly. Alan, apologize to your wife right now. Alan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. He stormed out, leaving Diane and me staring after him in shock. Oh, Camille, Diane said softly, reaching for my hand. I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were this bad. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They flowed freely as I confessed everything. The loneliness, the neglect, the growing chasm between Alan and me. As Diane held me, murmuring words of comfort, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan, don't wait up, staying at a friend's tonight. I showed it to Diane, who shook her head in disbelief. This can't go on, she said, a determined glint in her eye. It's time we did something about my son's behavior. Are you with me? Through my tears, I nodded. Whatever Diane had planned, I was all in. Things had to change, and they had to change now. The morning after our disastrous dinner, I woke to find Alan's side of the bed untouched. My stomach churned as I remembered his text from the night before. Where had he really gone? I trudged downstairs, the smell of coffee guiding me to the kitchen. To my surprise, Diane was already there, bustling around in her floral apron. Good morning, dear, she said, sliding a steaming mug towards me. I thought you could use this. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, grateful for her thoughtfulness. Thanks, Diane. You didn't have to do this. She waved off my gratitude. Nonsense. We're family. Her eyes softened with concern. How are you holding up? I sighed, slumping into a chair. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I'm drowning, Diane. And Alan, he's not even trying to throw me a lifeline. Diane sat across from me, her weathered hands covering mine. I want you to know something, Camille. No matter what happens with Alan, you'll always have a place here. You're like a daughter to me. Tears pricked my eyes. That means more than you know. Just then, we heard the front door open. Alan stumbled in, looking disheveled and reeking of alcohol. Where have you been? I demanded, anger flaring. He squinted at me, then at Diane. What's she doing here? I live here, remember? Diane's voice was cold. The question is, where were you all night? Alan waved his hand dismissively. Out. Needed to clear my head after that ambush last night. I stood up, fury coursing through me. Ambush? Is that what you call us wanting a normal conversation about our future? Our future is fine, Alan shouted. Why can't you just be happy with what we have? Because what we have isn't a marriage, Alan. It's barely even a roommate situation at this point. Diane stepped between us. Both of you, calm down. This isn't helping anyone. Alan glared at his mother. Stay out of this, Mom. It's none of your business. It became my business when you moved into my house, Diane shot back, and when you started treating your wife like she doesn't matter. Alan's face contorted with rage. Oh, so you're taking her side now? Perfect. Just perfect. He stormed upstairs, leaving Diane and me in stunned silence. I'm so sorry, I whispered, mortified by his behavior. Diane shook her head. Don't you dare apologize for him. This isn't your fault, Camille. As we cleaned up the kitchen, trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. He doesn't deserve you. You should leave him. I showed it to Diane, my hands shaking. Who could this be? Her brow furrowed. I don't know, but it's unsettling. Block the number for now. Throughout the day, Alan remained locked in our bedroom. Diane and I tiptoed around the house, speaking in hushed tones about what to do next. I think, Diane said carefully, it might be time to consider your options, Camille. This situation isn't healthy for anyone. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I know. I never thought it would come to this. As evening fell, Alan finally emerged. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot. Camille, he said, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? Alone? Diane squeezed my hand reassuringly before leaving us. Alan sat heavily on the couch. I've been thinking. Maybe you're right, about us needing our own place. Hope fluttered in my chest. Really? You mean it? He nodded. Yeah, I found an apartment. We can go see it tomorrow if you want. I was about to agree when my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Don't trust him. He's lying to you. My blood ran cold. I looked up at Alan, searching his face for any sign of deception. What was really going on here? Camille? Alan prompted. What do you say? I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Sure. Let's check it out. As Alan left the room, looking relieved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. Who was sending these messages? And more importantly, were they right about Alan? The apartment Alan showed me was perfect, spacious, bright, and far from his mother's watchful eye. As we walked through the rooms, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the fresh start we needed. So what do you think? Alan asked, a rare smile on his face. I nodded, trying to match his enthusiasm. It's lovely. When can we move in? His smile faltered. Well, there's just one thing. The deposit's a bit steep. I was thinking, maybe we could borrow from Mom? And just like that, the bubble burst. Are you kidding me, Alan? The whole point was to be independent. He held up his hands defensively. It's just temporary. We'll pay her back. I shook my head, disappointment settling in my chest. No, if we do this, we do it on our own. The drive home was tense. As we pulled into Diane's driveway, I made a decision. Alan, I want to have a baby. He nearly choked. What? Where is this coming from? I'm not getting any younger, I said, my heart racing. And I thought maybe it would bring us closer. Alan's face hardened. Camille, we can barely afford an apartment. How the hell are we supposed to afford a kid? We'd make it work, I insisted. Lots of couples do. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, couples who actually want kids. I told you when we got married, I'm not interested in being a father. His words hit me like a physical blow. But I thought you might change your mind. Well, I haven't, he snapped. And frankly, I'm not sure you'd be cut out for motherhood anyway. You can barely take care of yourself. Tears stung my eyes as I got out of the car. That's not fair, Alan. I've been taking care of both of us for years while you... While I what? He challenged, following me inside. While I work my ass off to provide for us? Provide what? I shouted back. We live with your mother. We have nothing of our own. Diane appeared in the hallway, concern etched on her face. What's going on? Alan threw up his hands. Camille's lost her mind. She wants a baby now. Is that so terrible? Diane asked softly. It is when she's not fit to be a mother, Alan spat. The room fell silent. I stared at my husband, a stranger wearing the face of the man I'd once loved. How can you say that to me? He didn't answer, just stormed off to our room, slamming the door behind him. Diane approached me cautiously. Camille, honey. But I couldn't bear her sympathy right now. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, ignoring her calls behind me. I drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision. How had my life come to this? When had Alan become so cruel? My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. He'll never give you what you want, but I know someone who will. Curiosity overrode my better judgment. I replied, "Who are you?" The response came quickly. "Someone who knows Alan better than you think. Meet me at Rosewood Park in an hour if you want the truth." My hands shook as I stared at the message. This was crazy. Meeting a stranger based on cryptic texts. But then I thought of Alan's cold eyes, his cutting words. What did I have to lose? I turned the car toward Rosewood Park, my mind racing. Who would be waiting for me there? And what truth could they possibly reveal that would make sense of the mess my life had become? As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a lone figure sitting on a bench near the pond. A woman, her face obscured by large sunglasses. My heart pounded as I got out of the car. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward her, ready to face whatever came next. I approached the woman on the bench, my heart pounding. As I got closer, she removed her sunglasses, revealing a face I'd never seen before but somehow felt familiar. "Camille," she said, her voice tinged with sympathy. "I'm Linda." The name hit me like a slap. Linda, the woman from the mysterious texts. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "Who are you? How do you know Alan?" She took a deep breath. I was Alan's girlfriend." The world tilted on its axis. "Girlfriend? But he's married. To me." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Camille. I didn't know he was married when we met. By the time I found out, I was already in love with him." My mind reeled. Alan, my husband, had a girlfriend? "How long?" I managed to choke out. "Almost a year," she whispered. A year. While I'd been struggling to save our marriage, begging for scraps of attention, Alan had been building a life with someone else. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, anger rising to replace the shock. Linda looked away. "Because I'm pregnant, and Alan, he wants me to get rid of it." The words hung in the air between us. I thought of my conversation with Alan just hours ago, his cruel dismissal of my desire for a family. And now this? "I don't know what to do," Linda continued. "I thought you deserved to know the truth, and I hoped maybe you could help me decide what to do next." I laughed bitterly. "Help you? You've been sleeping with my husband for a year, and you want my help?" She flinched. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'm scared, Camille. Alan's not the man I thought he was." "Join the club," I muttered. We sat in silence for a moment, two women betrayed by the same man. Finally, I stood up. "I need to go. I can't process this right now." Linda nodded, handing me a piece of paper. "My number, in case you want to talk more." I took it without thinking and walked away, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. How could Alan do this to me, to us, and a baby, the very thing he'd told me we couldn't have? When I got back to Diane's house, I found her waiting up for me, worry etched on her face. "Camille, where have you been?" "I've been so worried." One look at her kind, concerned face, and I broke down. Through sobs, I told her everything, the texts, meeting Linda, Alan's betrayal. Diane held me close, her own tears falling. "Oh, my dear girl, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Alan could be so cruel." As my sobs subsided, a strange calm settled over me. I looked at Diane, seeing not just my mother-in-law, but a true friend. "What do I do now?" Diane's eyes hardened with resolve. "Now we fight back. Alan can't treat you this way and get away with it." "But how?" I asked, feeling lost. A slow smile spread across Diane's face. "I have an idea. It's a bit unconventional, but it might be just what we need to give Alan the wake-up call he deserves." As Diane outlined her plan, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. It was risky, potentially disastrous, but after everything I'd learned, I was ready to take that risk. "Okay," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's do it." Diane squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. Alan won't know what hit him." As we stayed up late into the night, plotting our next move, I realized something. In losing my husband, I'd gained something far more valuable, a true ally in Diane. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. Tomorrow, we'd set our plan in motion, and Alan? He was about to learn that hell hath no fury like two women scorned. My hands trembled as I dialed Alan's number, Diane's plan echoing in my mind. One phone call to set everything in motion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "What is it, Camille?" Alan's irritated voice crackled through the speaker. I swallowed hard, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Alan, I need your help. It's your mother." "Mom? What about her?" "She's been different lately. Cruel. I think she wants me out of the house." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. Camille, don't start this again. Mom's been nothing but kind to you. I pressed on, my heart racing. No, Alan, you don't understand. Yesterday, she threatened me, said if I didn't leave, she'd make my life hell. That doesn't sound like Mom at all, Alan said, his tone dismissive. You're probably just misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. I injected real anger into my voice now. Your mother told me I was worthless, that you'd be better off without me. How am I supposed to misunderstand that? Alan's voice hardened. Look, I'm sure if we all sit down and talk. Talk? I nearly shouted. Alan, I'm scared to be in this house. Don't you care at all? There was a long silence, then quietly, Of course I care, Camille, but what do you want me to do? It's her house. My blood ran cold. Even faced with the idea of his mother threatening his wife, Alan couldn't muster any real concern. Diane had been right. He truly didn't care anymore. I want you to stand up for me, I said, my voice breaking. To choose me, for once. Alan sighed again. Camille, Suddenly I heard a muffled female voice in the background. Babe, who are you talking to? My heart stopped. That wasn't Diane's voice. No one, Alan said quickly, his voice distant as if he'd moved the phone away. Just work stuff. I'll be there in a minute. Ice flooded my veins. Linda. He was Linda. Alan, I said, my voice deadly calm now. Who's there with you? What? No one. Look, Camille, I've got to go. We'll talk about this mom thing later, okay? The line went dead. I stared at the phone, shock and rage warring inside me. Diane appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern. Camille, what happened? I told her everything, Alan's callous response to our fabricated story and the damning evidence of the female voice. Diane's face hardened. That's it, no more games. It's time we confronted him directly. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. You're right, but first there's something I need to do. I pulled out the piece of paper Linda had given me and dialed the number. Hello? Linda's hesitant voice answered. Linda, it's Camille. We need to talk. In person. Now. There was a pause, then a shaky exhale. Okay, where? I gave her the address of a nearby cafe. And Linda, bring any proof you have of your relationship with Alan. Texts, photos, anything. Okay, but why? Because, I said, my voice steel, we're going to take that bastard down. As I hung up, I caught Diane's approving nod. That's my girl, she said softly. I grabbed my keys, a newfound determination coursing through me. I'll be back soon, and then we're going to confront Alan once and for all. As I drove to meet Linda, my mind raced with possibilities. This was it, the moment everything would change. Alan's web of lies was about to come crashing down around him, and I was done being the victim. It was time to fight back. My hands shook as I spread the damning evidence across Diane's kitchen table. Photos, text messages, even hotel receipts. Linda had provided it all. Each piece was a knife to my heart, but also fuel for the fire burning inside me. Diane's face was a mask of controlled fury as she examined the proof of her son's betrayal. That miserable lying snake, she muttered. I nodded, my throat tight. We have to confront him, tonight. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan. On my way home, we need to talk about Mom. Diane and I exchanged glances. This was it. Are you ready? She asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. We heard Alan's key in the lock, and my heart raced. He walked in, his face clouding when he saw us both waiting. What's going on? He asked warily. I stood, my voice steadier than I felt. We know everything, Alan. About Linda, about the baby. The color drained from his face. Camille, I can explain. Explain? Diane's voice cracked like a whip. Explain how you've been lying to your wife, to me, for over a year? Alan's eyes darted between us. Mom, this doesn't concern you. The hell it doesn't, Diane shouted. You brought that woman into my house, Alan. You made a fool of all of us. I stepped forward, laying out the evidence on the coffee table. No more lies, Alan. It's over. He stared at the photos, the messages, his face a mix of shock and anger. You went through my things? You talked to Linda? Don't you dare try to turn this around on us, I spat. You're the one who betrayed your vows, who's been living a double life. Alan's face hardened. Fine. You want the truth? I'm in love with Linda. I have been for months. She understands me in a way you never could, Camille. His words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. And the baby? Were you just going to abandon your child? He flinched. That was complicated. I told Linda we couldn't keep it. It would ruin everything. Diane made a sound of disgust. I didn't raise you to be this kind of man, Alan, to throw away your family, your responsibilities. You didn't raise me at all, Alan shouted. You were too busy trying to control every aspect of my life. That's why we're still living in this damn house. I watched mother and son face off, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. But I wasn't about to let Alan deflect from his actions. Enough, I yelled. This isn't about your childhood issues, Alan. This is about the fact that you've been lying to me, cheating on me for months, and now you have a child on the way that you're trying to abandon. Alan's face twisted with rage. What do you want from me, Camille? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ever married you. I'm sorry I wasted years of my life trying to make this work when we both know it's been over for a long time. His words hung in the air, sharp and final. I felt something inside me break, but also something else, a sense of release. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. It is over. I want a divorce. Alan blinked, clearly not expecting this. What? I turned to Diane, who nodded in support. I'm leaving, Alan. Tonight, and I'm taking half of everything we own. You can't do that, he sputtered. Watch me, I said, my voice steel. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. As I walked out of the room to pack my bags, I heard Diane's voice, cold and final. And you, my son, will be leaving too. This house is no longer your home. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding. This was it, the end of my marriage, but also the beginning of something new. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. I had Diane, and more importantly, I had myself. It was time to reclaim my life on my own terms. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Diane's guest room, where I'd spent the night after the explosive confrontation with Alan. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the divorce papers in my hands. This was it, the final step in reclaiming my life. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Diane entered, her face etched with concern and determination. Are you ready, dear? I nodded, standing up, as I'll ever be. We made our way downstairs where Alan waited, his face a mask of anger and defeat. The tension in the room was palpable as we all sat around the kitchen table. Before we do this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I want to know why, Alan. Why wasn't I enough? Alan's jaw clenched. It wasn't about you, Camille. I felt trapped in this house, in this life. Linda was an escape. An escape? Diane's voice cracked like a whip. You destroyed your marriage for an escape? Alan's eyes flashed. You're one to talk, Mom. You've been suffocating me for years, always hovering, always judging. I watched as mother and son glared at each other, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. But I wasn't about to let Alan deflect from his actions. Enough, I said firmly. This isn't about your mother, Alan. This is about the choices you made, the lies you told, the family you're abandoning. Alan's face crumpled. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But you did, I said softly. You hurt all of us, and now we all have to live with the consequences. I slid the divorce papers across the table. Alan stared at them for a long moment before picking up the pen. As he signed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. What happens now? Alan asked, his voice small. Diane spoke up, her tone resolute. Now you leave. This house is no longer your home. I'm signing it over to Camille. Alan's head snapped up. What, Mom? You can't. I can, and I am, Diane cut him off. Camille needs a fresh start, and so do I. We're going to sell this place and split the proceeds. Then we're both moving on, together. I looked at Diane in shock. We hadn't discussed this. Diane, I can't accept. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You can, and you will. You're the daughter I always wanted, Camille. Let me do this for you, for us. Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, overwhelmed by her generosity and love. Alan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. So that's it? You're both just cutting me out of your lives? I met his gaze steadily. You cut yourself out, Alan. But it doesn't have to be forever. If you get help, if you make amends, especially to Linda and your child, maybe someday we can have a relationship again. But for now, yes, this is goodbye. As Alan walked out the door, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But instead of sadness, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Diane and I spent the rest of the day making plans. We'd sell the house, find new places to live, close to each other, but not too close. We talked about trips we wanted to take, hobbies we wanted to pursue. For the first time in years, I felt excited about the future. That night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Diane turned to me with a smile. You know, Camille, I always wanted a daughter. I just never expected to find her quite like this. I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling truly at peace. I always wanted a mother who understood me. Looks like we both got our wish. As the sky turned from gold to purple, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about love. And Diane and I, we'd chosen each other. We'd weathered the storm together and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't alone anymore, and that was worth everything. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines, positive. My heart raced as I tried to process this life-changing news. How would I tell Chris? As if on cue, I heard the front door open. Nora? You home? Chris called out. I quickly shoved the test into my pocket and splashed some water on my face. In here, I managed to reply, my voice shakier than I'd intended. Chris appeared in the doorway, his face etched with worry. Everything okay? You look pale. I forced a smile, just feeling a bit under the weather. How was your interview? He ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of stress. It was interesting. Can we talk? We moved to the living room, settling onto our worn couch. Chris took a deep breath. They offered me the job. That's great news, I exclaimed, genuinely happy for him after a year of fruitless job hunting. His expression remained serious. There's a catch, Nora. The position is in Seattle. My stomach dropped. Seattle? But that's across the country. Our whole life is here. My art studio, our friends, your family. I know, Chris said, reaching for my hand. But this is a fantastic opportunity. The salary is double what I was making before, and there's room for growth. I pulled away, standing up to pace the room. What about my career? I've just started to build a name for myself in the local art scene. Chris's eyes pleaded with me. You can paint anywhere, Nora, and with this salary, we could afford a house with a dedicated studio space for you. I felt torn. The pregnancy test weighed heavily in my pocket, a secret that would change everything. I don't know, Chris. It's such a big decision. We don't have to decide right this second, he said, his voice gentle, but they need an answer by the end of the week. Just then, a cry erupted from the baby monitor. Our daughter, Lily, was awake from her nap. I'll get her, Chris offered, standing up. As he left the room, I sank back onto the couch, my mind reeling. How could I uproot our entire life? But how could I ask Chris to turn down this opportunity after struggling for so long? When Chris returned with Lily, her chubby arms reached out for me. I took her, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Mama sad? Lily asked, her big blue eyes studying my face. I kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart, Mama's just thinking. Chris sat beside us, his arm around my shoulders. We're a team, Nora. Whatever we decide, we'll do it together. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. How could I tell him about the baby now? It would only complicate things further. I have an idea, Chris said suddenly. Why don't we take a drive to that little bed and breakfast we love? We can spend the weekend there, talk things through without any distractions. The thought of escaping, even for a couple of days, was tempting. What about Lily? My mom's been begging for some grandma time. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to watch her. I hesitated, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. As Chris made the arrangements, I excused myself to the bathroom. I pulled out the pregnancy test, staring at those 2 pink lines that had the power to change everything. How could I tell Chris now, with this job offer hanging over us? And how could I not? My mind raced with the possibilities, each scenario more daunting than the last. One thing was certain, this weekend getaway would be anything but relaxing. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in front of our new home in Seattle. Rain drizzled down, matching my mood perfectly. Chris squeezed my hand, his excitement palpable. This is it, Nora, our fresh start. I forced a smile, my free hand resting on my now visible baby bump. It's different. As we walked up the driveway, a voice called out, Welcome to the neighborhood. A statuesque blonde in yoga pants jogged towards us, all smiles and bouncing ponytail. I'm Angela, your next-door neighbor. Chris stepped forward, extending his hand. Chris, this is my wife, Nora, and our daughter, Lily. Angela's eyes lingered on Chris a beat too long before turning to me. Oh, and another one on the way. How exciting! I nodded, suddenly feeling frumpy in my travel-worn clothes. We're due in 4 months. Well, if you need anything at all, I'm right next door, Angela said, her hand on Chris's arm. Anything at all. As she jogged away, Chris chuckled. Friendly neighbors. That's a good sign, right? I mumbled agreement, but something about Angela's overly warm welcome left me uneasy. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. Chris threw himself into his new job, often working late. I struggled to find my footing, missing my old art studio and friends. One afternoon, while Lily napped, a knock at the door startled me. It was Angela, holding a plate of cookies. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. "How are you settling in?" I followed, feeling oddly defensive in my own home. "Fine, thanks. Chris is loving his new job." Angela's eyes sparkled. "Oh, I know. We had lunch yesterday. He's quite the charmer, isn't he?" My stomach clenched. "You had lunch?" "Just a quick bite in the cafeteria," she waved dismissively. "Did he not mention it? Anyway, there's a neighborhood barbecue this weekend. You simply must come." After she left, I stood in the kitchen, Angela's words echoing in my mind. Why hadn't Chris mentioned lunch? That evening, as we ate dinner, I casually asked, "How's work going? Meet any new people?" Chris nodded, mouthful of pasta. "It's great. Everyone's been really welcoming." I waited, but he didn't elaborate. "Anyone in particular?" He shrugged. "Not really. Oh, did I mention there's a company picnic coming up?" I set down my fork. "Actually, Angela invited us to a neighborhood barbecue. Same day, probably." Chris's face lit up. "Perfect. We can do both. The picnic's in the afternoon. We can hit the barbecue after." I pushed my food around my plate. "You seem awfully excited about the barbecue." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'm excited about making friends here, Nora. This move was hard on all of us. I want it to work." I nodded, guilt washing over me. Was I being paranoid? The barbecue arrived, and I found myself surrounded by Angela's friends. They were all impossibly fit, sipping wine and trading neighborhood gossip. "Oh, Nora," one woman said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "It must be so hard being pregnant in a new city, and with Chris working such long hours." Another chimed in. "At least he has Angela to keep him company at work. She's such a dear, always looking out for the new employees." My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" The women exchanged glances. "Oh, nothing, dear. It's just nice that he has a friendly face at the office." I scanned the yard, spotting Chris and Angela by the grill, laughing at some private joke. As I watched, she placed her hand on his arm, leaning in close to whisper something. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What was really going on here? As we drove home that night, Chris chatted happily about the new friends we'd made. I stared out the window, my mind racing. "Nora? You okay?" Chris asked, concern in his voice. I turned to him, searching his face. "Chris, is there something you're not telling me?" Chris's face paled at my question. "What do you mean? I've told you everything." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. "It's just... you and Angela seem awfully close." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Nora, she's just being friendly. You're reading too much into this." I let it drop, but sleep eluded me that night. The next morning, while Chris was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. There it was, a thread with Angela. My heart raced as I opened it. "Great seeing you today. Lunch again tomorrow?" "Absolutely. Same time, same place." "Can't wait. You always brighten my day." I felt sick. The messages weren't explicitly romantic, but the familiarity, the frequency, it was all wrong. Chris's footsteps approached. I quickly put the phone down, my mind reeling. "Hey, honey," he said, kissing my cheek. "I'm heading out. Big presentation today." I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Good luck," I managed to choke out. As soon as he left, I burst into tears. Lily toddled over, her little face scrunched with concern. "Mama sad?" I pulled her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "No, sweetheart. Mama's okay." But I wasn't okay. Far from it. That afternoon, I took Lily to the park, desperate for a distraction. As she played in the sandbox, I sat on a nearby bench, lost in thought. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up to see an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "Please." I gestured to the empty seat. "I'm Marianne," she said, settling beside me. "You look like you could use a friendly ear." Something about her warmth broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole story. The move, Angela, the text messages. Marianne listened without judgment, her eyes filled with understanding. When I finished, she took my hand. "Oh, honey, I've been where you are." "What did you do?" I asked, desperate for guidance. She smiled sadly. I ignored it, convinced myself I was imagining things. "Don't make my mistake, Nora. Trust your instincts." As we talked, Lily ran over, proudly showing off a handful of pebbles. Marianne's face lit up. "What a beautiful collection. You must be so proud of your mommy." Lily beamed, then ran back to play. Marianne turned to me, her expression serious. "Whatever you decide to do, remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for her, too." Her words struck a chord. I thought of the baby growing inside me, of Lily's innocent face. They deserved better than this. "But how can I be sure?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Marianne squeezed my hand. "You dig deeper, gather evidence, and when you know for certain, you act." That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, Chris's phone in my hands. He was working late again, or so he said. With trembling fingers, I opened his location history. My breath caught as I saw an unfamiliar address, visited multiple times over the past weeks. I grabbed my car keys, determination overriding my fear. It was time to see for myself. The address led me to a small apartment complex. As I pulled up, I saw Chris's car parked outside. My heart pounded as I approached the building. Through a ground-floor window, I saw them, Chris and Angela, sitting close on a couch, laughing over glasses of wine. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. It was real. It was all real. As I drove home, tears blurring my vision, one thought echoed in my mind: what am I going to do now? The annual company picnic loomed, and I dreaded every second of it. But I had to go. I needed to see Chris and Angela together with my own eyes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. As we arrived at the park, Chris squeezed my hand. "You okay? You've been quiet lately." I forced a smile. "Just tired. The pregnancy, you know." He nodded, distracted by something over my shoulder. "Oh, there's Angela. I promised I'd help her set up the volleyball net." Before I could respond, he was gone, jogging towards that familiar blonde ponytail. I watched as they laughed together, their bodies in perfect sync as they worked. "Mama, swing!" Lily tugged at my hand, pulling me towards the playground. As I pushed Lily on the swing, my eyes never left Chris and Angela. They were always near each other, sharing private jokes, touching casually. It was like watching a dance I wasn't part of. "Your husband seems close with Angela," a voice beside me said. It was one of the women from the neighborhood barbecue. I stiffened. "They're just colleagues." She raised an eyebrow. "If you say so, dear. But if I were you, I'd keep a closer eye on them." Anger flared in my chest. How dare she? But as I opened my mouth to retort, I realized she was right. I needed to know the truth, once and for all. As the afternoon wore on, I lost sight of Chris. Panic rose in my throat. Where was he? Where was Angela? "Lisa, can you watch Lily for a minute?" I asked another mom. "I need to find Chris." I searched the crowded park, my heart pounding. Then I saw them, ducking behind a storage shed at the far end of the field. Without thinking, I followed. As I approached, I heard Angela's lilting laugh. "Oh, Chris, you're terrible." "You love it," Chris's voice replied, low and intimate. I peered around the corner of the shed, and my world shattered. Chris had Angela pressed against the wall, his lips on her neck, her hands tangled in his hair. A strangled gasp escaped me. They sprang apart, guilt written all over their faces. "Nora!" Chris exclaimed, his face pale. "It's not. This isn't." But I was already running, tears blurring my vision. I heard Chris calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I found myself at the playground, scooping up a confused Lily. "We're going home, baby," I choked out. "But Daddy?" she asked, looking around. "Daddy's busy," I said, my voice breaking. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, Chris caught up to us. "Nora, please, let me explain." I whirled on him, fury and pain coursing through me. "Explain what, Chris? How you've been lying to me? How you've been sneaking around with her?" He reached for me, but I jerked away. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." "It was a mistake," he pleaded. "It didn't mean anything. I love you, Nora. You and Lily are my world." I laughed bitterly. "Your world? Is that why you've been spending every spare moment with her?" Chris's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk about this? We can fix this." For a moment, I wavered. I thought of our life together, of Lily, of the baby on the way, but then I remembered the sight of him with Angela, and my resolve hardened. I don't know if we can fix this, Chris, I said, my voice cold. I don't know if I want to. As I drove away, leaving Chris standing alone in the parking lot, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What would I do now? How would I tell Lily? Could I raise 2 children on my own? But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small voice whispered, "You're stronger than you know. You can do this." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a plan already forming in my mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I hadn't slept in days. Chris's desperate calls and messages went unanswered as I grappled with the shattered pieces of my life. Lily's confused tears only deepened my anguish. How could I explain that Daddy wasn't coming home? One particularly rough morning, I found myself back at the park, hoping the fresh air might clear my head. Lily was with my mother, giving me a rare moment alone. "Nora?" a familiar voice called. It was Marianne, the kind older woman I'd met before. "Oh, honey, you look like you've been through hell." The sympathy in her eyes broke something in me. Before I knew it, I was sobbing, pouring out the whole sordid story between gasps. Marianne listened, her face a mix of compassion and anger. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "You're stronger than you realize, Nora, but you need to be smart about this." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping my eyes. She leaned in, her voice low. "Men like Chris, they're good at spinning tales. You need hard evidence before you make any decisions." I shook my head. "I saw them together. What more evidence do I need? For yourself? Nothing. But for a divorce, for custody, you need more." Marianne's eyes hardened. "I made the mistake of confronting my ex-husband without proof. He turned it all around on me, made me doubt myself. I won't let that happen to you." Her words sent a chill through me. "What should I do?" "Dig deeper," she said firmly. "Get into his email, his bank statements, follow him if you have to, and don't let on that you know anything." The thought of pretending everything was normal made me sick. "I don't know if I can face him." Marianne squeezed my hand. "You can, and you will, for Lily and for that baby you're carrying. They deserve better, and so do you." As I drove home, Marianne's advice echoed in my mind. Could I really play the role of the unsuspecting wife? The thought of Chris touching me, kissing me, while I knew about Angela, made my skin crawl. But as I walked into our house, the house we'd chosen together, filled with memories and dreams, resolve steeled my spine. I would do whatever it took to protect my children and myself. That evening, when Chris came home, I forced myself to greet him with a smile. "Hi, honey. How was work?" The relief on his face was palpable. It was, "Good. Nora, can we talk?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Of course." We sat on the couch, an ocean of unspoken words between us. Chris took a deep breath. "About what happened at the picnic, it was a horrible mistake. Angela means nothing to me. You and Lily are everything." I wanted to scream, to throw his lies back in his face. Instead, I said softly, "I overreacted. I've been so emotional with the pregnancy. Can we just start over?" The hope that bloomed in Chris's eyes made me want to vomit. He pulled me into a hug, murmuring apologies and promises. Over his shoulder, my eyes fell on a framed photo of us with Lily, my beautiful, innocent daughter, my unborn child. They deserved the truth, whatever it might be. In that moment, I made my decision. I would play along, gather evidence, and when the time was right, I would bring it all crashing down. As Chris held me, thinking all was forgiven, I began to plan. I would leave no stone unturned, no secret unexposed. And when I was done, Chris and Angela would regret ever underestimating me. The game was on, and I intended to win. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife perfectly, all while gathering evidence with Marianne's help. We combed through bank statements, tracked Chris's movements, and even hired a private investigator. One rainy afternoon, Marianne and I huddled over my laptop, sifting through the latest batch of information from the PI. "Look at this." Marianne pointed to a series of transactions. Regular withdrawals, always the same amount, always on Fridays. My heart sank. The day he claims to work late. Marianne squeezed my hand. "We've got him, Nora. Now we just need the final piece of evidence." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the PI. "Meeting confirmed. Sending location now." I stood up, adrenaline coursing through me. "This is it. I'm going." Marianne looked concerned. "Are you sure? I could go instead." I shook my head. "No, I need to see this with my own eyes." The drive to the motel was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, matching the storm in my heart. I I parked across the street, my eyes fixed on room 12. At exactly 7 p.m., a familiar car pulled up. Chris stepped out, looking around furtively before knocking on the door. Angela answered, pulling him inside. I felt numb. Even after everything, a part of me had hoped it wasn't true. I raised my phone, capturing video of Chris entering the room. Suddenly, a tap on my window made me jump. It was the PI, gesturing for me to roll down the window. "Mrs. Thompson, I've got audio set up in the room. Do you want to listen?" I hesitated, then nodded. He handed me a small device with headphones. Chris's voice came through clearly. "I can't keep doing this, Angela. Nora's pregnant. I need to focus on my family." Angela's laugh was cold. "Oh, please, you've been saying that for months. Face it, Chris, you're not happy with her. You never have been." "That's not true," Chris protested weakly. "Then why are you here?" Angela challenged. There was a long pause, then the unmistakable sound of kissing. I ripped off the headphones, bile rising in my throat. I'd heard enough. As I drove home, my mind raced. I had all the evidence I needed now. But what would I do with it? Marianne was waiting when I got back. One look at my face told her everything. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry." As I recounted what I'd seen and heard, Marianne's expression hardened. "He doesn't deserve you, Nora. It's time to take back your life." "But how?" I asked, feeling lost. "A quiet divorce? Try to keep it civil for Lily's sake?" Marianne shook her head. "No. Men like Chris, they need to be exposed. Publicly. It's the only way they learn." Her words ignited something in me. Years of suppressed anger, of putting everyone else first, of dimming my own light. It all came rushing to the surface. "You're right," I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "No more hiding. No more pretending. It's time everyone knew the truth." Marianne smiled, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "That's my girl. Now let's plan this out properly. We want maximum impact." As we strategized late into the night, a part of me wondered if this was too far. Was public humiliation really the answer? But then I thought of Lily, of the baby I was carrying. I thought of all the women who had been in my shoes, who had suffered in silence. No more. It was time to reclaim my voice, my power, my life. As Marianne and I finalized our plan, I felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. In just a few days, everything would change. There was no going back now. I placed a hand on my growing belly, whispering a promise. "We're going to be okay. Mama's going to make sure of it." The annual neighborhood block party was in full swing. Families mingled, kids ran around with sticky faces, and the air was thick with the smell of barbecue. I stood on the periphery, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Marianne appeared at my side, a reassuring presence. "Are you ready?" I nodded, unable to speak. In my hand, I clutched a USB drive containing all the evidence of Chris and Angela's affair. Photos, videos, bank statements, everything. Chris was at the grill, playing the role of perfect husband and neighbor. Angela hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at his jokes. The sight of them together made my blood boil. "Remember," Marianne whispered, "wait for my signal." I watched as she made her way to the makeshift stage where the karaoke machine was set up. She tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marianne announced, "we have a special presentation from our very own Nora Thompson." This was it, my moment of truth. As I walked to the stage, Chris caught my eye. He smiled, oblivious to what was about to happen. I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I really going to do this? Then I saw Angela place her hand on Chris's arm, and my resolve hardened. I plugged in the USB drive and grabbed the microphone. "I have a story to tell you all," I began, my voice shaky but gaining strength. A story about betrayal, lies, and the importance of truth. The crowd fell silent, sensing the gravity in my tone. Chris's smile faltered. "For months I've been living a lie," I continued, "pretending everything was fine while my husband carried on an affair with our neighbor." Gasps rippled through the audience. Chris's face drained of color. Angela tried to slip away, but Marianne blocked her path. "I have proof," I said, pressing play on the first video. Chris and Angela's voices filled the air, discussing their secret meetings. The crowd watched in stunned silence as image after image appeared on the screen. Chris entering the motel. Bank statements showing his withdrawals. Text messages full of intimate details. I locked eyes with Chris. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was too stupid, too trusting?" He started towards the stage. "Nora, please." "No," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. "You don't get to speak now. You've done enough talking behind my back." As the evidence continued to play, I saw the reactions around me. Shock, disgust, pity. Angela had collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Chris stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. But then I heard a small voice. "Mommy?" Lily stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. My triumph turned to ash in my mouth. What had I done? I stumbled off the stage, pushing past the murmuring crowd to reach my daughter. As I scooped her up, I caught sight of Chris. The devastation on his face mirrored my own. "Nora," he choked out, "I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" But it was too late. The damage was done. As I carried Lily away from the chaos, Marianne caught up with us. "You did it, Nora. You showed them all." "No," I cut her off, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. This wasn't right. Not like this. Marianne's expression hardened. "Don't go soft now. He deserved this." I looked at Lily, clinging to me in confusion, then back at the devastation I'd left behind. Maybe he did, but Lily didn't, and neither did I. As we walked away from the party, the sounds of shock and gossip fading behind us, I realized the bitter truth. In my quest for revenge, I'd hurt the very people I was trying to protect. The triumph I'd imagined felt hollow. Instead of closure, I was left with a gnawing question. What do I do now? The days following the block party were a blur of tears, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. Chris moved out, staying with a friend. I was left alone with Lily, trying to explain why Daddy wasn't home. One afternoon, as Lily napped, I sat in my makeshift art studio, staring at a blank canvas. For the first time in years, I felt the urge to paint. As I picked up a brush, there was a knock at the door. It was Chris, looking haggard and remorseful. "Can we talk?" I nodded, letting him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the weight of our broken marriage between us. "I'm so sorry, Nora," Chris began, his voice cracking. "What I did was unforgivable. I understand if you want a divorce." I took a deep breath. I thought I did, but seeing Lily's face that day, it made me realize revenge isn't the answer. Chris looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we owe it to Lily and to this baby," I placed a hand on my swollen belly, "to try and work through this. But things have to change, Chris. I won't be taken for granted again." We talked for hours, laying everything bare. Chris's insecurities about providing for the family, my resentment at giving up my art, the breakdown in our communication. It was painful, but cathartic. "I want to go to counseling," I said firmly. "Both of us, together and separately, and I'm going back to painting. It's not negotiable." Chris nodded eagerly. "Anything you want. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As we talked, I felt a shift within me. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to ebb, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother. I was Nora, artist, woman, survivor. Weeks turned into months. Chris threw himself into therapy, taking on more responsibilities at home. I set up a proper studio and started selling my paintings online. Slowly, we rebuilt trust. One evening, as we tucked Lily into bed, she asked, "Are you and Daddy happy now?" I looked at Chris, seeing the man I fell in love with, changed but somehow stronger. "We're working on it, sweetie, every day." As her due date approached, Nora found herself in her studio, working on a new piece. It was a self-portrait, not the meek housewife she'd become, but the strong, resilient woman she'd discovered. Chris appeared in the doorway, a mug of tea in hand. "That's incredible, Nora. It's so you." I smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. "It is, isn't it?" He set the tea down and wrapped his arms around me, careful of my belly. "I'm so proud of you and grateful you gave us another chance." I leaned into him, feeling our baby kick. "We've both changed, Chris. This isn't the life I imagined, but maybe it's the one we needed." As I put the finishing touches on my self-portrait, I realized that this, the messy, complicated, beautiful life we were rebuilding, was my masterpiece. The next day, I received an email from a gallery in the city. They wanted to feature my work in an upcoming show. As I shared the news with Chris, watching his face light up with genuine pride, I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect, but okay. That night, as we lay in bed, Chris's hand on my belly, I thought about the journey we'd been on. The pain, the betrayal, the near destruction of everything we'd built. But I also thought about the strength I'd found, the voice I'd reclaimed. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother anymore. I was Nora Thompson, artist, survivor, woman reborn. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I knew I had the strength to face them, not just for my family, but for myself. The canvas of our life wasn't perfect. It had its dark spots, its messy streaks, but it was ours, and it was beautiful in its own way. And I, Nora Thompson, was the artist holding the brush.